on and get started. And for those of you that don't know, so I'm Sue Anstis. I'm co-founder of the Women's Sport Collective with Kate Hannon. I'm not sure where she is on your screen, so I'll ask her to give a little wave. There you are. It's Kate there. So we've co-founded the collective and really want it to be a very informal, collaborative place for everybody, a network. So even with this evening, we want people to give us some feedback, let us know what you think. This is the first event that we've had of this kind, hosting a guest to answer your questions and to chat to. So if it goes well, we'll do more. So please, do give us your feedback. The collective keeps on growing. So we're just over 1,800 members, women in the network now, from a whole range of sports and different range of roles, and as you've seen, from around the world as well too. So really fantastic that it keeps on growing. We've got just over an hour, so probably 55 minutes left with our fabulous guest this evening. So we'll kick on and get started without taking too much more time for introductions and so on. So a brief introduction, if I can, to Stacey. And then what I'd really love, some of you have sent questions to me for her. So I would love to have any more questions you might have, just to pop them into the chat function if you've got questions coming as we're going through, and we'll come to you to ask them, or you can say that you'd like me to ask them. But it's always really nice if people have to take themselves off mute and ask their own questions. So the more questions we can have, that's fantastic to really get to understand and hear a little bit more from Stacey. So as a brief introduction to Stacey, I'll read it off of here, Stacey, so I don't get it wrong. So Stacey has represented her country at two international level, two sports, so both at football and in boxing. Following a successful football career where Stacey represented England, played in the FA Cup and played for over 6 years in the US and in Sweden, she then went on to pursue her dreams of a career in boxing. And during her 6-year amateur boxing career, Stacey became European silver medalist and 3-time national champion. She then turned professional and in 2018 became the first British woman to win the Commonwealth title, which we'll hear more about in a moment. And last month, Stacey announced her retirement from sport, from boxing, with a very powerful letter to sport, which some of you may have seen. And again, it'd be good to hear more from Stacey about that. So welcome, Stacey, and thank you for giving your time to be with us here this evening. You've taken yourself off mute, that's marvellous. So I wonder whether, just to start with, you could perhaps just take us back to your early days and some of those memories that you had of playing football.
Absolutely. Thanks everyone for joining this evening. It's and I guess since you said if it goes well you'll do another, so I know if you don't it means I've been rubbish, so
no pressure.
So thanks for joining everyone. Honestly, I think the Women's Sport Collective is just incredible, and I'm sure the legacy will go on and on and on for future generations, which is brilliant. So thank you for everything that all of you are doing in sport. So football, for me, I had two loves as a kid, as you'll probably have guessed, which were football and boxing. Quite how I got into football, I don't know, because being honest, all my family are crap at football. So there wasn't really any good influences or anyone to aspire to in that way. Some of them don't know the rubbish, but believe me, they are. And so it was just looking in the playground, to be honest, and seeing all the lads playing football. And I just felt drawn to it. I really do not know why, but I mean, I had friends who were girls, but they just weren't doing things I was interested in. Hopscotch had a very limited sort of, appeal to me, as did doing things with elastic bands and having weddings. So that's all that seemed to be the choice. And I just loved football. So I got picked for the school team, so I went along to the training sessions. And then in my first game, I would have been 7, just about to turn 8. And we had our first game, and it was just the most thrilling thing ever to be playing, because obviously I'd watched Match of the Day and watched games, but I'd never had a game like with a real referee and the whole proper goals and the whole setup. So it was just thrilling. And then partway through the game, a parent and a coach on the other team realised that I was a girl. Now, at the time, as some of you will be aware, yes, the ban on women's football had been lifted in 71, but the FA didn't officially recognise it till 1993. So in the 80s, when I was playing football, it was a strange position, and most women in my generation will have experienced this, that there weren't any leagues or structure for girls to play in, but they also had a rule you couldn't play with the boys. So it was a tough one. And so I went along, obviously I wasn't aware of any of this, and just went along to play. And when the parent and coach under the team realised there was a girl, they insisted that I leave the pitch. And walking across that pitch as a little kid, I was just doing what I loved. It was a horrible, horrible feeling. I didn't have the words to articulate what that was then because I was a kid, but, I did definitely feel humiliated and weird. That's the best way I can describe it. It was quite confusing. Now, for whatever reason, I didn't stop playing football. I went home and I insisted that my mum cut my hair short so I could pretend to be a boy and play on the team. The problem with this is other kids saying, why do you want to be a boy? Well, I never wanted to be a boy. I just wanted to play football. And at the time, that was the only way. The really sad thing is that a lot of kids don't do that, or they don't have that support maybe. And they just give up. And, I think it's just so sad. And this obviously is something that can happen to boys as well. I've had a lot of parents contact me whose sons are into dance or ballet, and, they face that opposite stigma because that challenges stereotypical masculinity, and they've given up. And imagine what my life would have been like and all of your lives without sport. And so it's so sad that this is still happening. But suffice to say, I went on and stayed in football. Boxing I loved, just as much. And I was in the gym. It was more obvious the influence. My dad was a boxer. My granddad ran our gym. And so I was in there every night with all the lads, and I did all the same training. I just absolutely loved everything about boxing. And I got to about the age of 11 when you can usually start doing what's called skills bouts. And, me and my little group of mates went to my granddad and said, right, we're ready to box. And he said, okay, we'll get you carded. And then he looked at me and he just said, you can't box, kid. And I said, what are you on about? And he said, it's illegal for girls. And I just couldn't believe it. It was like the worst punch to the stomach ever. And I thought, again, it was just really confusing. I thought, illegal? What's going on here? And it is what's what I knew. It's what I enjoyed. It was, my social thing, my friends. It was what I looked forward to every day. I couldn't believe it. So because I was a very driven and competitive kid, I knew I wanted to compete. So at that time, it was very much a closed door in boxing. But in football, the FA had started to get involved. So by then there were girls' teams. I went along to my first girls' team training, and that was an amazing feeling. I think mixed sport is great, but sometimes there is a place for, girls-only teams and perhaps boys-only teams. And my God, when I went along to my first team training with all these girls, it was like I'd found my tribe, because here was all these little girls who were talking about Predator football boots, and they had little shin pads on. And I was like, oh my God, they're just like a load of mini-me's. I still feel exactly the same now. Like 2 years ago, I took my niece, me and my boyfriend took my niece to watch the Man United and Man City women's game at the Etihad, and there was 31,000 people, and many of whom were little girls in the kits. And it was like that same feeling. I've never lost that. It's just a great thing to see. And except this time they were watching role models who hopefully they can aspire to be, which didn't exist when I was younger. So I think the difficulty with it was that other people didn't understand how there could be a girl who wanted to do boys sports. Plus I dressed like a boy. Of course I didn't. It was just that there weren't female football kits then. In fact, there weren't really any female training clothes, to be honest. My mum was an aerobic instructor, and she had all those leotards and pop socks and all that. It just wasn't my thing. So if you were going to wear women's workout clothing, then you either went out on the football pitch dressed like Jane Fonda, or you got boys, so-called boys stuff. So of course they dressed like a boy, but that led to people calling me shim, she-male, questioning my sexuality a lot, which I didn't even know what they were talking about when I was 13, 14. I was like, what are they talking about? So I would say it was a very difficult time as a youngster, because it was very confusing, and I was constantly wondering what was wrong with me. And I had, as a lot of us will have had to do for many years, I've had to unlearn all the lies that I was told and acquired and intuitively picked up as a child, that women are not as good, that there's certain things we shouldn't be doing. Our bodies weren't capable of things with a lesser than, umpteen messages that we're just bombarded with. Even those subtle things like using girl as an insult, the fact that even now people refer to me as a tomboy. I'm not. I'm a professional athlete, retired professional athlete, who's dedicated my life to sport and my love of sport. And by just labeling me a tomboy, it takes away who I am, what I've achieved, what I've overcome, what I stand for. And so even those, subtle language uses, I had to unlearn, and it took me a very, very long time. And that's why I'm so passionate now about being the role model I didn't have. and trying to educate, if that's the right word, you know, as many, particularly young people as I can, so that they can hopefully more quickly go through that process than I did.
I want to come on to talk about your, I guess, that pathway through football. But a quick question in terms of netball interests me, because we've got some people from netball on the call. So you say that you're very competitive and you wanted to compete and play. So why not netball or athletics? You almost went into the sports that you were always not always going to be blocked from, but you clearly were blocked from at that early age. So why do you think you didn't take a different path with a different sport?
To be honest, I hated those pleated skirts that you have to wear for netball. And I remember getting suspended a couple of times when they finally gave in and let me play footy and PE with the boys. But then they insisted that I wear the girls' uniform, and I was like, "You're for real? I'm not going to wear a half frock to play football. Like, what are you on about? Like, it's not suitable for that sport anyway." So then it caused all that, and then it had just come back to me being angry and confused about my sexuality. I was like, I just don't want to wear a skirt to play football. But anyway, so that put me off. And also, I'd found the things that I loved. I absolutely loved football and boxing. And, you know, they used to say, why we fall in love with what we do. Look at the people some people are married to. I mean, you'd think they'd thought that one through, but they pick it out for some reason.
So can you talk us a little bit about that? And I'm conscious we haven't got, I could talk to you for hours about your career path, but in terms of that career path, I guess to England on the pathway and then internationally playing as well too.
So if I could just tell a really quick story about that, it kind of puts it in a nutshell of my process or journey, if you like, is that when I was 16, I got my first England call up. So I signed for my first Premier League women's team as a 15-year-old, which was Tranmere Rovers. And I went along to my first training session. We ran for what felt like about 100 miles in sand dunes. I didn't even know there was beaches on the Wirral on Merseyside. But anyway, I was nearly being sick. And then we came back and they're right, we're going to get the footy out. And I was like, oh my God. It was just, honestly, my 15-year-old body was not ready. So I knew I had to go away and really work, which I did. And ended up signing for them, and it was a fantastic experience. And that's where I learned to banter. The years in the boxing gym had definitely helped me prepare to be the only mank in a Scouse team, that's for sure. And then I got picked for England under 18s. And ended up playing for Doncaster Bells, which was the team I'd always really wanted to play for. Played for Manchester City and stuff along the way, but Donny Bells was where I always wanted to play. And then I took the opportunity to go to America. Went on a scholarship there for 5 years, spent a pre-season in Brazil, and then finished my football career in Sweden. So I had some mega experiences in football. Very grateful to something called Title IX that I found out about that happened before I was even born, which is, you know, what gave me the opportunity to even go over there. And that's a great example of me standing on the shoulders of those who've come before me. And, you know, I don't know them, they don't know me, all those men and women that fought for that, but I've benefited from it. And that's what we're all doing now. You know, that the youngsters coming through in the next generation might not know all of us, but we have to carve this pathway for them. So the two examples I'd give is when I was 16, I got my first England call up. You used to get a letter, then obviously get an email now. You used to get a real life letter in the post, and getting that letter with the 3 lions on it, and do you know what I mean? Like the official FA badge, it was absolutely mind blowing for a footy mad kid. And I worked in a factory at the time. I was 16. And I went to my boss because there was no holidays available on the rota. And I said, I need a week off. And he said, what for? And so I just gave him the letter, and I was stood there and I was so excited and I was brimming with pride. And he just didn't say anything at all. And then eventually just kind of looked up at me and he said, you want me to give you a week off to play for a women's football team? I said, well, it is the England women's football team. And he went, pff, and he made all these jokes. And I said, look, it means a lot to me. Can I just take it unpaid? To which he agreed, thankfully. I walked out of the office feeling really small, ashamed and like an idiot for thinking it was such a big deal. And I thought, oh my God, I'm not playing for the England football team. I'm playing for the women's England football team. And I'd always kind of known it was different. It's just that it didn't feel like that when I got the letter. It was the best thing in the world to me. And he kind of told me, no, it's not. And I internalized that because I was a kid and I didn't have any other narrative with which to face that. You know, that's the message I'd been told again and again and again and again. So why would I question it? So, you know, and I know we can't change every person liking behind that desk, but all of us can be part of trying to get the message through, particularly to young people, that if they have an interaction like that, whether it's about race or disability or gender, class, whatever it is, that they can leave that scenario still feeling proud of who they are and what they do, despite the negative sort of attitudes of others. So fast forward 20 years, I'm 36. I win the Commonwealth title in Zimbabwe. Absolutely incredible experience. But afterwards, I don't get a belt. And I rang the head of the Commonwealth Boxing Council upon my return and said, yes, it was an amazing experience. It was brilliant, blah, 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 but not getting a belt was massively disappointing. And he said, oh, you know, I was going to ring you to explain so you can understand, because it's me that needs to understand something in this situation. So he said, Tim, can you just leave the freezer right now? Thanks. Anyway.
I thought there was someone at the door with a belt.
No, there's no one at the door. The freezer, it's just, I don't know, something urgent to get out the freezer, I think. So, so he said, you know, we can explain. So he said, the manufacture of the replica belt has ceased production. So I said, what's that got to do with me? So he said, well, we do replica belts for women and real belts for men. So I said, oh my God, why is that? So he said, well, there's more money in men's boxing. I said, I know, but surely if it meant even paying for it with my own money, you know, I could have bought the belt, because I'm never, ever going to get that moment back again. And I thought the worst moment would be not having the belt after the fight, because I've no memories whatsoever of it, because it didn't happen. I've no photographs of me and my coach with that belt, you know, to treasure forever. But it wasn't the worst bit. The worst bit was that everybody at home, it had been live streamed back home. Everyone was so excited to see this belt, but I hadn't had the heart to tell them there wasn't one. And when we got back to Manchester Airport, loads of mine and my coach's friends and family had come out to, you know, surprise us. And I didn't have that belt to share with them in that moment. And it was a horrible, horrible feeling to think, my God, all these years later, everything that I've put in, I've made history as the first British woman to do it. I've done it all with a full-time job. Do you know, how is this still happening? And I said to him, right, there's nothing we can do about that. It's gone, it's done. How quickly can I have a real belt? And to which he responded, well, you can have one within a couple of weeks, but they're quite expensive. So unless you've got a sugar daddy, you probably won't be able to have one. And it's really hard to put into words the injustice, you know, how that, and I said, you shouldn't have said that. Oh, I didn't mean it like that. I said, well, however you meant it, you shouldn't have said it. And you know what? I was absolutely gutted, like sick to my stomach, that as I am with any type of social injustice. No, I didn't punch him. So it was a good job, as someone's just mentioned, Josephine. I didn't. It's a good job it was over the phone, I can tell you. But I know we have to be careful how we pick our battles, particularly as women, because they'll say we're hysterical and all of that. So we kept the conversation going. I said, look, this cannot happen to another future female champion. That's the bit, you know, you need to understand. And he agreed, and he said, okay. So they agreed to make a women's Commonwealth title belt, which I've got here, which I'll show you in a second. And that's, you know, just before Christmas, there were 2 British women who fought for the Commonwealth title, and that belt was there in the ring, which is an amazing feeling. So even though at the time it was really, really, really sickening and a horrible thing to go through, and I was, you know, like, why me? This isn't fair. I'm facing it again. I was the right person for it to happen to, because I am someone who'll do something about it. But that's only because now I've learned about the history of women's sport, and I know the phenomenal progress we have all managed, you know, everybody collectively. And sadly, we're usually only compared to men. And it's really a ridiculous comparison. It's like a 100-meter race. Men are at 80 meters and we're at the start line due to everything, investment, social stigma, that we've been banned from stuff, you know, banned from marathons because they said our uterus would fall out. I mean, ridiculous. Now women are fantastic at running these ultra marathons. They're fell running, they're doing incredible things. But I had to learn that. I had to have role models who you know, went against that. I had to have that other narrative. Being armed with that, so to speak, and having that in my toolkit allowed me to realise that what he did was wrong, how I'd been treated was wrong. And I had that, not the voice necessarily, because I always had a voice, I just didn't know what to say because I wasn't armed with that information. So that's why I think it's so important that we get that message out there, that these, you know, we've been told so many untruths over the years.
Oh, there you go. I've muted you. Sorry. Thank you for that. And I guess just looking back, and I know you kind of talked about the Commonwealth Games there, but in terms of the Olympics and your amateur career, can you give us a little bit, I don't want to just talk about injustices, but I guess just to paint a picture as to what drives the fire within you to kind of fight for social change, really. But what happened in terms of your
no, it's a dead important point, because people often talk about how fantastic the Olympics are, and they are, and how brilliant it's been for women's boxing, but that's only if you come under certain categories. And the Olympics doesn't have equal weights for boxing for women, nor does the Commonwealth Games. And when I won the European silver medal, it was in the year of the Glasgow Commonwealth Games, and I just assumed I'd be going. And then to find out I couldn't, literally just because of my gender, was absolutely sickening. And I ended up watching teammates who I'd just boxed with alongside, you know, a few months before, in the nosebleed section, sat with my dad watching, thinking, how is this possible? Like, how is this injustice possible? And then when the inaugural European Games was announced, I was so excited. I had a look and it said that if you're the top 4 on, you know, in Europe, in your sport, you get to go. And I thought, oh my God, this is my chance. I'm going to go to a multi-games, only to find out that even for the very first one, they also weren't having equal weight categories. And I just couldn't believe it. I was absolutely devastated. And that is really what, you know, along with an injury that I had, led me to make the choice to go professional, because there was nothing else for me in the amateurs. I'd been to the World Championships, the Europeans, I'd won the ABA national title, and none of the other competitions were available to me. And it's wrong. And when I got the chance to speak at the European Parliament and United Nations about this. And there were 2 things that happened at the United Nations. One was that a phenomenal rock climber from Peru spoke before me. So everybody had the headphones on because there's a translator. And then when they introduced me from England, everyone took the headphones off, and I spoke for about 1 minute and everybody put them back on, like even Australia, Canada, America. And I was like, Jesus. They obviously didn't have a Mancunian translator or a Northern one. But anyway, that was the first thing. So I was like, oh God, pronounce your words properly. And then the second thing that happened was later I followed somebody from the Olympic Committee who was just talking about how fantastic it was with equality. And then, you know, I didn't have statistics or graphs. I just had my heart on my sleeve and a genuine story of somebody whose potential, if you want to call it that, dreams, whatever you want to call it, were hit a concrete ceiling. I wouldn't even call it glass, because there was literally nothing that I could do. And strangely, these things have always enraged me, but I always thought, if I can have that world title fight in Manchester, it'll kind of make up for it. And now I'm not going to get that because I've had to retire. I'm even more angry. So, but compelled to do something about it. So I'm going to channel it in a positive way.
I love the way that Stacey goes, oh yes, I spoke at European Parliament and United Nations, you know, like you do.
Nobody understood me anyway, Sue.
There's a quick question from Joanna there, just in terms of the weight categories. And I think if you just explain almost why the weights are different, but I think it's obviously in boxing, but there are in other sports too. We see less categories for many female sports than we do for the men's. And is that the case in boxing? Yeah,
boxing's a weight managed sport, just to make it fair. And obviously you couldn't have someone who's 20 stone with someone who's 10 stone. So you're matched on kilograms in the amateurs. And the massive problem for women is that the 3 weight categories that were introduced from the beginning was 51, so that's your Nicola Adams, 60 lightweight, which is Katie Taylor, and then 75, which is Clarissa Shields, Savannah Marshall, so the really tall, bigger ones. So I was 69 kilos boxer, which means I'm 9 kilos above 60. So to get down to 60, I've had to have cut a leg off or something. And the next one up is 75. Which is a big jump, because, you know, you don't want to just put body fat on to get there, because then you wouldn't be at your best. And also the weight in those fighters is in the height. Obviously, they're also taller. So some of them are like massive. And so, you know, what a lot of the female boxers have ended up doing is either putting the bodies at incredible risk by losing the weight. And we have seen this where the periods have stopped. They've had problems with fertility later on because they've tried, you know, in some people's cases, it is the livelihood. And they've tried to get down to the weight, and then others who've put the weight on. And then they're in with people who are naturally much heavier hitters, much bigger girls. And it's, it's a really sad thing to see, to be honest. And the Olympic Committee always kept saying it was because the Olympics was already too big, and then went and brought in surfing, skating, and everything else, which is a good thing, but clearly that wasn't quite the true answer, I'd say.
And just moving forward to your retirement, so what is it that triggers, you kind of alluded there to that you're not getting the match that you really hoped for in the end, but what triggered it? And I guess how tough a decision was that to make? I can only imagine for you.
Well, what triggered it? I've had knee problems for years because I've had, 12 broken bones, 9 surgeries, whatever, like a lot of athletes. I've had, all sorts of stuff. And I did have a knee injury at the end of my amateur career, which should have been a very straightforward repair. It was just a simple meniscus repair. But they made a mistake during surgery, and I woke up with a chemical burn all over my leg. It was horrendous. It got infected. It was just terrible, which, not that it's a direct result, but, if the proper funding was there to look after elite athletes, because, I was getting ready for the Europeans, was getting ready to represent my country again. And arguably I should have had proper care, but I didn't. So, I had to have whoever was going. Obviously, some bloke who usually does plumbing on a weekend, God knows who he was, but he burnt my leg off anyway. So it was 12 months. It was I had to have all sorts of skin things done at the burns unit. It was just horrendous. And I put 20 kilos on. I was very, very depressed, and I just didn't think I'd box again. And thinking of going back to the amateurs after everything I'd been through, and, the lack of opportunities that were there, thinking of turning pro was the thing that gave me that equal excitement and fear, which I tend to need to really get me up and going. So, and I also wanted to try and show that if you didn't have, for the women who weren't in Olympic weight categories, there would still be a pathway to winning titles in the pros, which, nobody was doing at the time. And I was only the 6th UK female professional. Now there's over 30, which is fantastic in just 4 years. So this knee problem has been ongoing. And to cut a long story short, over the last 2 years, I've tried everything. I've had, 2 surgeries, I've plasma treatment, I've had orthotics, I've had a brace that I wear most of the time, well, all the time when I'm training now, and sometimes when I'm walking. I've been on crutches 3 times. Every single time we upped to the training to get ready for a fight, I ended up back on crutches, and then, I had to have it drained at one point. I mean, the thing was huge. So when it happened again last year, I knew straight away in my heart, I knew. And when I went to see the doctors and they did the scan, it was different this time, because they said, if you don't adjust what you're doing now, your long-term mobility will be severely, I need a major surgery anyway. I need part of my femur, my thigh bone, taken out and replacing with a plate. So I'm trying to put that off as long as I can, because I'm only 39, and I don't want to be having that this young if I can, but if I have to, I have to. So I'm hoping to get another couple of years before I have to have it done. So, I want to be active for the rest of my life. And that was important to think of. And plus I knew I couldn't get through a camp. So, and yeah, making that decision was horrible. But I mean, I'm sure everybody can relate to that. If you've finished businesses, as you have, Sue, it's like a part of yourself. It's your identity. It leaves a big hole. It's loss. It's been exactly, and honestly, I know people might think it's ridiculous. It has been exactly like grief and loss of a person, except something else that I've loved, which isn't a person. So the one thing that's been massive is people's messages, because it's reminded me more than anything that sport for me has always been about the personal challenge and my love for it, and reaching my potential and all of that. But it's been massively about having a positive impact on others. And I've been so privileged, as many of you will have been, to see the power of sport. It's the most powerful thing on the planet for making a difference. And I just happened to love it. Thank God I didn't fall in love with something like maths, because it was, although I know it's got its place, but sport, wow, like what a difference it makes. And I've been able to, go to the refugee camps and do sport with the kids. I did a massive project with the homeless while I was in America. I've done things here, obviously, in communities and schools, been in the favelas in Brazil, playing all different sports with kids, just amazing experiences and that's what I need to remember, that's the real beauty of sport. That's what I'm here for, with all this energy I've got and the heart, I've got a big heart, thankfully. It's here. I'm here to make a difference to others. And now I've got to try and find a way to do that without competing in sport. And I will do.
And can you tell us a little bit about Pave the Way and your plans there in the future?
Yeah, so Pave the Way started as a 1-week project. And usually when you turn professional as a boxer, you have a nickname. So like the Cobra or the Assassin or the Hitman or something like that. And my nickname amongst my friends is SpongeBob SquarePants. Because whenever I put weight on, I turn into a square-shaped human. So all my mates are horrible. But that's been my nickname for years. I did have it on my boxing shorts, but I couldn't go with it as my actual official nickname. So I decided, rather than make one up, I'm going to go with something that I stand for and that means a lot to me and that I represent, which was Pave the Way. And I don't know where it came from. I just thought that's what I'm trying to do, pave the way for the next generation in my sport and all sports. So in line with my professional debut, which was just the most amazing experience, having been a little kid, I used to cut the end off a cucumber and make my own gum shield, be running around the kitchen. And, I never really believed it was going to happen. It was illegal at the time. But then to actually be having my pro debut in Manchester in front of all my friends and family was just amazing. So that week we did a Pave the Way project. So visited loads of schools, community centres. We did an exhibition of women who work in sport, because I feel athletes are a lot more visible, but women who work in sport are not. And we need to know what they do, who they are, so that, young girls who maybe can't make a living out of sport or are not competitive know that they have got this entire career ahead of them if they want, where they can combine their love for sport with a career. So that's on permanent display at the Velodrome, the National Cycling Centre in Manchester. So did all that. It was great, top week. And then didn't think much of it, but then people were starting to use the hashtag and it grew some momentum. So it's just grown from there. And we've done inspiration days, we've done loads of stuff, and it's now a charity, which we're going to launch this year properly. But it's about both genders, because over the last 4 years of running this project, it's just been self-funded in my own time. And again, the amount of parents who've reached out, who've got a little boy, who've given up on something they love, that's not good enough either. And if it's not good enough for me as a female, it's not good enough for little boys either. And yes, sport is at the heart of it, but this is across industries. I speak to women in law, in business, in marketing, sales, who've had such a similar experience to me, but in their field. So it's about, trying to spark that social change really, and challenge these gender stereotypes, and in particular the ones around masculinity and femininity that are still such a massive barrier to people reaching the potential and pursuing the passions. It just shouldn't be happening anymore.
We're getting some lovely comments in the chat function. I will share those, save those and share those with you. And I want to go on to some other people's questions in a moment. I've got a couple more before I do. In recent years, I feel we've seen so many powerful female activists on the sports side: Megan Rapinoe and Serena Williams, Naomi Osaka, the entire WNBA. I guess, how does that make you feel? And why do you think we're seeing so much strength from women, particularly in recent years?
I think the only difference between now and before is that we are seeing it. You know what I mean? That we can visibly see it's always been there. I mean, look at like I say, when you look at what women's sport has achieved, it's phenomenal. If you don't only compare it to men's and look at what we've done, in 1972, when they very first opened up the Boston Marathon to women, after we know obviously what happened with Catherine Switzer and they tried to drag her off the course, there was only 12 women joined in. In 2019, 12,000 women ran that marathon. That's phenomenal. That's just one example. That's without the Tokyo, the London, the New York. It's amazing. In cricket, we weren't allowed to be members of Lords till 1991. The boxing wasn't made legal to 97. It goes on and on and on and on. And yet, look at us, what we're doing. It's, the massive crowds that are going, the huge, spectators it's just increasing all the time. Sponsorship, looking at the World Cup the other year, after my experience with my boss, then all these mega companies falling over themselves to get involved with the England women's team. It was very emotional for me watching that. And all of those women I played alongside, and all the women way before that, the Dick Kerr's ladies, Barbara Buttrick, who used to play, well, Dick Kerr's women, but that's what we called them in the day when everyone who played sport was a lady. But, Barbara Buttrick, who boxed years and years ago, she's in her 70s now and was an unbelievable, the Mighty Atom, she was called, and went and boxed in America. These women have been here forever. They just got shut up. They weren't allowed to speak. They were never given the exposure. And if they did, they were treated like weirdos or freaks or something like that. And that's awful. And there tends to be a pattern with change, that it starts with ridicule. And so the people who do it at first are ridiculed, because that's the first element of change, because nobody's done it before. Then the second phase tends to be discussion. And then the third phase is acceptance. And it's not just obviously gender. I saw that happen with Barack Obama because I was in America when he started his campaign. And I remember at first the ridicule phase and people saying, what's he doing? African Americans as well were basically saying, well, he's out of his lane. What's he doing? And then the second phase happened fairly quickly, the discussion phase, where they were like, actually, he's really charismatic and isn't he a great speaker, and listen to his policies. So far that he actually, you know, gained that much acceptance that it got him for 2 terms. But that is a rigorous path. And for those who do it first, it's very, very tough. And many of you on here will be the first now and will have been the first to do something. We just didn't get seen before. These women have always existed, and that's why we're able to do what we do now, because of what they did before. It's just that, you know, nobody told us about them, and we weren't able to see them and hear them.
Brilliant answer indeed. Is Millie McAvoy here on the call?
Yes, I'm here.
Lovely. You've got 2 lovely questions. Would you like to ask your questions, Stacey?
Yeah, I was just interested to get your thoughts on, obviously we've had Emma Hayes being linked with the Wimbledon job this week, and she said how she actually thinks it's quite insulting for women's football to be seen as lesser to men's football. And I thought I'd be interested to know what you thought around that, but also if in the future after your retirement, if you were to go into coaching, would you consider coaching both male and female boxers?
Yeah, I'll very quickly answer the second part. I've no interest in coaching, so that's an easy one for me. But I do love doing the grassroots stuff. So with kids or people who've never done it before, I love doing that. But I'm not interested at all in the elite side of it or anything like that. So that's that part of it. In terms of Emma Hayes, I think she's fantastic. She's an incredible role model, and I'm really glad that she's spoken out as she has. But what we do see, we've seen it recently with Karen Carney as a pundit. We've seen it, I'm sure a lot of you will have seen yesterday with Yoshiro Miro, the Tokyo Olympic chief, former Japan Prime Minister, saying that, you know, if we have equal numbers of women and men on the board, then we have to restrict how much women are allowed to speak, because they have struggle finishing, you know, difficulty finishing what they're saying, and it's annoying. And, you know, that we have about 7 women on my committee and everyone understands their place. So my point there is that when people are put in this position in the first do it, or when women are put in a position on a board, or they're the first to be a pundit, first to present a show like Jackie Oatley had, we put that much pressure on them, hound them to death, make, you know, that the fear in them must be immense, that then they don't want to do it. And that's the danger of it. And that's why networks like this are massively important, because these, to me, all of you are like positive petrol tanks that all of us will know. Pushing this bloody equality thing uphill is really, really hard, because this is what you get. You know, and how disappointing is that for us as women working in sport or as athletes to go on social media and see on the BBC, on all New York Times and all these things that, you know, a leader, because that's what he is, a leader at the, you know, at the top of the Olympic Committee saying that about us. That is so disheartening. And you go, whoa, what have we got to do? You know, and these stereotypes, they stick, and people go, yeah, they do. They talk too much. They can't get to the point. And, you know, it's just a small example of it, that how can you then, as a woman on that committee, go into that boardroom and feel able to say everything that you need to say without panicking that you're talking too long, you're not getting to the point? Do you know what I mean? The pressure that we put on the first people to do it is immense. And that's why when that positive petrol tank is going low, networks like this are crucial. And I think it's dead important, men being part of that as well. But having that, you know, that group of women who totally understand what it's like to fill up your positive petrol tank again, so you can keep going for that fight, because the pressure that women are under when they're the first to do something is enormous. And you know, I've had it too, and I'm sure a lot of you have, and it's hard. So, you know, I just hope Emma Hayes knows that she has, we've all got her back, that we 100% are behind her, and we know how tough it is, but we're with her. We're right with her.
I love that analogy. The Women's Sport Collective is positive petrol tanks. Can't say it, but it's fantastic. Is Rebecca Richards on the call for a question, please?
Yes, I am. Hello.
It's like that Celebrity or Blankety Blank or Celebrity Squares or something, isn't it, really? Yeah.
Hi, Stacey. Thanks so much for being here today. Just want to say, please never change how you talk, because your passion is like infectious. It's amazing. You briefly touched on it about leaving pro sport and kind of becoming a normal person. Not that you'll ever be a normal person, but I mean, and you said you think it sounds stupid that it's like grievance. It doesn't sound stupid. I'm 3 years out of the sport, of the performance arena now, and it's still an incredibly hard process to navigate through. I kind of wanted to get your opinion on, as an athlete, whether you make it pro or you don't, how do you think we should be better supported, or better support the athletes once they do leave it? Because there's so much depression, lack of direction, identity crisis. You know, what do you think we should be doing more of?
I think it's a brilliant question, and you know, I totally relate to you 100%. I can feel that in every bit of my being. What I think we should do is be doing it before athletes retire. I think we should completely get rid of this plan B thing that we say. Have a plan B, have a plan B. If you're an athlete, then your whole life is sport. You're all or nothing. That's just the way that you're wired. And I think plan B then means if you do end up doing it, the thing you really wanted to do, you didn't end up doing. So that's a bit rubbish. And how can you like invest part of your soul into something else when everything's got to go on that? So, you know, a bit like if you're marrying Jeff, you really need to be dedicated to Jeff. No one's going to go, have you thought about Jim, though, in case it doesn't work out with Jeff? Well, no, actually, because I'm kind of trying to make it work with Jeff. But what you can do is, while you're getting ready to marry Jeff, you can have other things in your life that isn't all Jeff. So it's probably not a great analogy. But anyway, don't even know who Jeff is. If you meet him, say hello from me. So what I would say is, rather than this plan B thing and have something else, encourage athletes to follow other passions, because that way it's not something else instead of, it's something a lot alongside. I'm really fortunate that a few years ago I didn't have that. I've always done jobs that are just fit around sport, and I've not been bothered, to be honest, about how much money I earn. I've worked at my school 10 years now on minimum wage. Everybody was saying when I retired the other week, oh, take your time and have a think and make sure you fill your time. I was like, what kind of money do you think I'm on? And you know what I mean? I've gone down to part-time over the last few years. And, you know, only in the last 2 years that I've started doing radio and the public speaking that I've, you know, earned money that's actually livable. It's never mattered to me before. You know, I just wanted to be able to do my sport. So I've had no career. I'm starting now building up a career. But what I have had is other passions. So a few years ago when I got injured and I was in America, it was like my life ended. Like my whole identity was gone, my purpose, my meaning. It was a horrible way to feel for someone who loves life, to feel like there was no point. I was very depressed, very lost. And I learned from that, and I thought, you can't be in this position again. You've got to have other things in your life outside sport that give your life meaning. So like I said, I'm building up a career, but I've got other passions. So I've got the radio now that I do. I've got Pave the Way. I've got my public speaking, which is just such a joy and a privilege, because people come and chat to you after and tell you their story, and it's such a delight. So I would say we should start encouraging athletes to think about their other passions, whether that's like Marcus Rashford, you know, speaking out on behalf of kids, or Naomi Osaka speaking out for Black Lives Matter, whatever it is. There's other passions with people beyond sport. So I'd encourage that, because that will be with you forever. And there's a way to make a difference. And nothing's ever going to be the same as sport. And I know nothing will ever be like walking out in that arena and fighting. Nothing, because nothing was like it while I was doing it. But it doesn't mean that my whole life's over, because there's other passions. So I'd encourage all athletes to do that.
The Jeff analogy seems to have gone down very well. People want to know if it's him. Is he in the freezer? People are going to use it. Lovely. Kate Hannon, can I take you off of mute to ask? You had loads of questions, so do you want to ask a couple?
Sorry, I think a problem then. You talk a lot about your dad and your granddad and the influence they had on your boxing career, but I understand your mum's quite a force of nature as well, while we're celebrating women here tonight.
Yeah, my mum's nuts, actually. She and a crap hairdresser, as you'll see from those early photos of me playing football with a like weird bob. But anyway, Yeah, my mum is has been a fitness instructor for about 32 years now. And she taught me a lot. She taught me, the big thing would be work ethic, because she was, her and my dad split up before I was 1. So I never remember them being together. And she then went on and had, you know, other children. So did he. They've had 6 marriages between them. So there's probably a Jeff in there somewhere. But anyway, and she worked full time, usually dragging us to her aerobics classes with her, where I'd be kicking a football in the corridor and my sisters would be, you know, doing colouring in or Lego or whatever, all the games we'd have. And she really taught us about work ethic, that, you know, it's, I mean, it was pretty phenomenal what she did, really, looking after us all and, you know, working full time. So that was the first big thing I'd say. And the second thing is just a massive love of life. And the belief she has in us is ridiculous. And like, when I remember sitting with her on the floor after I'd seen Tranmere Rovers play at like a tournament and saying, Mum, it was amazing. It was so fast. It was so skillful. And Sue Smith played then, who's now a pundit, and she was just unbelievable, like just the most amazing player. And I was like, oh, I want to be one of them. And we got this map out and she had a look and she said, it's there, Tranmere. And I was like, oh, my heart sank, because it was like 45 minutes away. Obviously I didn't drive. I was like 14 at the time. And she said, I tell you what, if you can get a trial there and you get in, I'll make sure you can get there. And between her and my nan, who's the first ever Northwest boxing recorder in boxing, by the way, and timekeeper, who's also a total force of nature, between them drove me every single week to Tranmere, 45 minutes there, 45 minutes back, after I'd done a full day's work, and so had they, and got me there and back. So they were phenomenal. And we find this in sport again and again, when they say it's not somewhere women should be. Well, everyone's all right with it when all the mums are carting every bugger about to all the sessions. That's male or female, apart from the fact that we've given birth to every athlete who's ever existed, by the way. But there you go. So yeah, they're amazing, Mum and Nan.
Josephine, would you, I did say I've got a question. Someone said, can we book Stacey again? That was the first question that came back. Josephine, would you like to ask your question?
Yes. Hi, Stacey. Nice to meet you. And thank you for all your passion and your energy. Boxer myself. So yes. Love that. Yeah, I would have punched him if he was in person. Question. You had mentioned earlier weight classes can have detrimental effects on periods. Was your period ever an issue when you were training or playing sports or competing?
I just bloody hated having it. That's the truth of it. The bleeding thing's an absolute pain, because when you're competing and you're in a weight managed sport, of course, to be honest, you know, I'm really hopeless at all this. I don't know, like, what my uterus is for, what fallopian tubes are for. I'm absolutely terrible at the biology of it. And I don't quite know what happens to your body, but all I know is that I could eat a person if they smelt of chocolate or sugar during that time. You just get bloated like a bloody Teletubby, and your weight can literally go up half a kilo overnight, which is an absolute nightmare for weighing in, obviously. So if you start your period the night before you're weighing in, absolute nightmare. But I'd say some other times when periods have been difficult, and this is why we need representation on boards, because we have to do a pregnancy test. And I was talking to someone about this over LinkedIn. Someone was being a bit, you know, rude on LinkedIn, which is rare, isn't it? Because they usually try and be the professional self, and then they just go and be vile under a different name on Twitter. But then they were saying, you know, you don't need people on board. I'd made the point about the lack of black people on boards, you know, and there should be more representation. Well, it doesn't matter. You have to think differently. So I said, well, could you think like a woman? Well, yeah, I could have said, right. So you could think like somebody who has to think about when they have that pregnancy test before the fight, because not only do you have to think about how that affects it, secondly, the boxing board get the result before you do, which is a disgrace. And thirdly, when you have it done at the Institute of Health or wherever you're getting it done, and you're on your period, as you'll know, you have to walk through with that sample. Now, that's not comfortable, is it? Only a woman could think of that, because there's only us that that have it. So there's been all sorts of things like that. So yeah, basically periods for me have been an absolute pain in the ass. And if I could have got rid of them ages ago, I would have done, because they do me head in. But it's something you have to manage. And this is another thing where how ridiculous that people say, Josephine, it's easier for women. Is it? Really? When you've got to think about birth control and hormones and God knows what else. And if you're going to have babies, when do you bloody do that? How do you fit it? Oh, no, it's much harder in that respect, much harder.
I'm getting a flurry of questions now, so I'm going to go very quickly. But I do want to have a couple more ask Kat. That is a brilliant question. If Kat can ask her question, that would be lovely.
I'll try and answer it quicker, sorry.
No, don't at all. Well, we're going to have you back. We'll have you, Stacey Copeland part 2.
I'm going to have to get some good lights in the background now.
Hi, Stacey. I think I'll just echo what everyone else has said. Absolutely brilliant hearing from you. I just wondered if you had any kind of practical tips for how to handle those conversations, which I'm sure we've all had and will continue to have, unfortunately, where people/men are perhaps dismissive or derogatory towards women's sports, and how you handle that without punching them in the face or getting really cross.
It's a great question, that, Kat. What I would say is the biggest thing of all is that you have to feel ready. I wasn't, as a 16-year-old going into that room. I felt ashamed of, you know, even coming to him with that letter and thinking it was a big deal. Felt like an idiot. I felt small. I wasn't ready. You know, that's not a place where you can then say, hang on a minute, mate. Do you know what I mean? So I think you have to feel ready. There's also the pressure that maybe it's uncomfortable, the environment that you're in. Maybe it could have ramifications down the line. You know what? That's okay. And I'd say to myself, I have to remind myself of it. And I'd say to all of you that if there is a time you've come out of an interaction like that and you're annoyed with yourself after, and you're like, I should have said that. Why did I let that slip? Don't be hard on yourself, because one, we haven't cocked up. You know, we shouldn't take that on. The person who said it shouldn't have said that. So that, first of all, the wrongdoer, it should stay with them. But also, we shouldn't be the one that have to fight it all the time. But we do feel like that. We do take it upon ourselves. But don't beat yourself up, because there are lots and lots of circumstances to take in a split second before you have that comeback of, is this person, is there a power imbalance? Have they got, do you know what I mean? Something over me that there's so much to take in. It's really difficult. But what I would say does help is being well informed. Know your facts about women in sport, so that when people come at you and say, you shouldn't be demanding equal pay because, you know, men get 100,000 and women get 5,000. Fine, we all agree. Then we have a discussion about the difference between equity and equality and see where they go from there. Because what they'll say next is, and anyway, women only do 3 sets at Wimbledon. All right, but they have the same number of bums on seats. So you can't use it in football, but then not use it in tennis. Do you get what I mean? Because by that, you're saying it's a business model. So therefore, if the same people are watching 3 sets and they've paid the same ticket price, there shouldn't be a problem. But we have to be informed about, you know, our facts about equity, inequality, inequity, and all of that. Then I think that gives us a bit of a toolkit with which to say, actually, have you thought about this? And often they haven't. And really think of it as rather than challenging it, we're helping them, aren't we?
We can try. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's very good. And I would definitely say with Stacey, I know I've had some comments on things around the game changes, others, and sometimes Stacey stepped in and actually had a conversation with whoever they might be on, there was a very long conversation with some guy, and actually winning them over to the other side. And they're not always arseholes. Sometimes they are just, you know, uninformed, and they just need some help and to be educated, really.
That one, I ended up sending the DVD that they'd done about me and my dad, and they loved it. So there you go.
Exactly. We're converting them one at a time. Bailey, I've got a few more moments. Bailey, would you like to ask your fantastic question?
Yeah, I don't know if this is a quick one or a long-winded one, but in short, if you could speak to 11-year-old Stacey and you could give her one piece of advice based on everything that you've learned over the course of your life, what would that be?
I'd just simply tell her to keep going, because at the time I didn't know how this was going to work out. And I would tell her, but I would be very honest with her. And I mentioned this at the end of my TED talk, actually, because there is a picture of me as a kid where I've got my dad's boxing shorts on and I've got my foot on a football in a hideous peach pair of sandals that some idiot put on me, but they weren't my choice. But anyway, the rest of the picture's cool. And I put that picture up at the end, and I say, the reason I'm so passionate about this is, besides the fact that I obviously want to change things for everyone else, I want to be able to go back to little me and tell her. And if I could, I'd say, do you know what, kid, this is going to be really hard. You're going to be called shim, shemale. I got spat at on a bus once because I got called a freak and I was a girl boy, a tomboy, all sorts of stuff. It was horrible. It was really hard. And I was constantly thinking, what is wrong with me? There must be something wrong with me. So I had all that. Then obviously you get to the point where your own boss mocks you. You get all the way to a title fight and achieve your dreams. You don't get a belt, and then someone speaks in a really derogatory way after all those years. It is disappointing. It's disheartening. It's hard not going to the Olympics, etc., etc. So I would tell her, it's, this is going to enrage you. It's going to hurt you. It's going to be disappointing. You're going to be heartbroken, but do it, because you're also going to have the most amazing experiences. And I would go through all of that again and again and again and again. The injuries, everything, to have those moments like in Zimbabwe, where I knew my nieces were watching, the kids in my school were watching, all the kids, young kids in boxing, where they got to have that moment with me. And I got my hand raised, and honestly, that minute where it felt like a lifetime waiting, and they went, and from Manchester, and it was like, who gets, some people live the whole life, don't they? And several lifetimes and never get that. So I'd tell her, keep going, because you're going to have the most amazing experiences ever. And you will eventually become a woman who is proud of who she is and what she does, which I am now. And it's my job to try and make sure that we have a lot of young girls like that. So that is what I'd tell her.
I've not cried. Not cried on one of our calls before. I think I might tonight. And what I'd be lovely, I'll get that clip. That's an amazing little YouTube clip of you when they make that announcement as well. So I'd be lovely to share that to everybody at the end of this call too. There are more questions coming in, and we are 7 o'clock, and I'm conscious of people's times, and it's Friday evening. So I'm going to thank Stacey for the most amazing, passionate, all these lovely comments coming through here. So thank you so much for your time. We really would like you back. We've got more questions, so if maybe in the future, that will be fantastic, and I'm sure more will come. I'd love to get a photo of everybody on the call if I could. If people are happy to, if you're not, then please turn off your screen, sit up nicely, smile, do whatever you need to do. I'm just giving you some warnings. Don't want to catch anybody with resting bitch face or anything. Lovely. So I'll do 3 screens. So if you have a couple of moments, say that one. Lovely. And I'll move across. I don't need to smile for the next one. I'm not in the next one. Lovely. Oh, screens off. Oh, screens off on if you want. You're on. Lovely. Oh, lovely. And one more. It's a lot of smiling, isn't it? You don't know who you are. That was absolutely bloody marvellous, Stacey. Thank you so much. And
just showing belts before you all go.
Yes, people say we set such a high bar for our first guest. God knows who's going to follow you on that, Stacey.
The national title belt that you win. So that was a special one, because the men used to get a massive cup, and the women used to get like this tiny thing, like it was out of a party bag, like, them tiny little medals. And then we all complained, and we wanted the same. So now this is the same for men and women. And that was the one where my dad was in my corner, because he was my coach as an amateur, and we were the first father and daughter to both win a national title. And then this one, which is being fought for, actually, obviously this is mine, but the belt, the women's belt, is being fought for by 2 British women next month, actually. And this is it. This is the Commonwealth title belt. So that's that. And I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone for joining tonight. And please keep doing what you're doing. I know we're all doing what we're doing in totally different roles in different ways, but every single person is massively important. And we have to think of this as a massive wave that's coming in. It's coming in and it's coming in, and they're not going to stop it. And we've had years where we've had a bit of a wave, and then they've managed to hold it back somehow with some kind of dam. The dam's burst, it's gone. And these waves of us all are going to keep coming and coming and coming. And we're all on these big ships together, riding that wave. So thank you for all that you're doing, because everyone's important in this. It's a massive, it is a collective, it really is. So thank you. And Sue and Kate, thanks for what you're doing, bringing everyone together. It's so important.
Fabulous. Thank you. And on that note of the boat, jump on the boat next Wednesday at 12 o'clock. I got the date right this time, haven't I? Not Tuesdays, it said in the newsletter. Next Wednesday, 12 o'clock is our next networking meeting. And then we've got loads of fabulous webinars coming up. Baz is talking to us about the female body to continue some of that conversation we've just just had there in March, and we've so lots more. So look at the womensportcollective.co.uk website for all the meetings. They're also in the LinkedIn group and on newsletters. And I'm only a couple of minutes over 7. Stacey, thank you. Everybody have a fabulous weekend. And we have recorded this, so we will share it too. But it's lovely to have you all.
If anyone's got any questions or they want to contact me, I'm on the Women's Sport Collective on LinkedIn or social media or whatever. Just send us a message. I'll be happy to interact or whatever.
Fantastic. Thank you, Stacey. Thank you.